Welcome, a very warm welcome to this episode 16 of the Huddle UK podcast. I'm your host, Philip Marsh. Thank you very much for tuning in, whether you're over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on the Huddle UK website, or watching the video here on YouTube. AFC South today, a division which has had its criticisms in recent years. It's not been a good couple seasons for the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Indianapolis Colts always have this hope with Anthony Richardson. Obviously, they will have a quarterback battle with Daniel Jones, and the Houston Texans have been the shining light of the division, the team that over on X you believe will win the division in 2025, but then themselves have never got through the divisional round of the playoffs. So it's a division that could do with a bit of sprucing up, and in the offseason, particularly at the draft, there have been new stars. We've got Cam Ward, new quarterback for the Titans, Travis Hunter, the enigma that he is for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So plenty of new players to get our teeth into today to talk about. We will be talking about all four teams, of course, 3 Huddle UK writers joining us for the Titans, the Jaguars, and the Colts. And we've got special guests representing the Texans. We've got Euan from the Turn Up for What podcast. Who'll be joining us at the end of the episode. Of course, as always, we go in reverse order for the team. So we'll be starting with the Titans, then the Jaguars, then the Colts, and rounding up with the Texans. Just a little bit of news as well from our end. Really excited to say we've got a couple of NFL players, current active NFL players, who have been lined up to do this podcast, who will be joining us over the course of the summer. So if you want to listen to that, we've got some really good guests. I can't explain how excited I am for some of the teams and the players who have agreed to come on the show. It's massive for us. So you don't want to miss any of that. So if you're watching on YouTube, remember, click that subscribe button. Even if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, close it down for a moment, run over to YouTube, click the subscribe button, because you'll want to see these videos coming up this summer. And of course, if you're listening on Spotify, whatever, remember, give us a 5-star rating and all the rest of it. It really helps us, because all the online content is still going on over at the Huddle UK website. All the 32 writers, we're loving it. It's brilliant. It's still growing, and we're getting more and more good feedback day after day. So go follow the website, go follow us on everything. It's at Join the Huddle UK on most social media sites. On YouTube, it is just Huddle UK. Anyway, that's enough of my ramblings. Thank you very much for listening, as always, and we'll get started with the Titans. Well, first up, as always, we go in reversed order, not to rub salt into the wounds early in each episode, but we're going to start with the Tennessee Titans and the Titans Huddle UK writer, Aimee Tovell. Aimee, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, and you're just saying as well, Titans fan, a big country music fan as well.
Huge country music fan. It's very stereotypical of me, isn't it? Like Music City and yeah.
Is that how you picked the Titans, or is there a different story into supporting Tennessee?
I considered moving to Nashville or Knoxville to do my master's. The University of Tennessee is home to the Body Farm, which is one of the leading research facilities in forensic anthropology. So I considered moving there, but as an international student, that would cost me a small fortune, and I don't have a money tree. So I did look at everything that was there, and the Titans came up, and I decided, no, I'm going to have to stay in the UK. But while I was at university, I was a cheerleader. So again, very Americanized, and we teamed up with the American football team that the university had, and then I got into the game that way, and I've loved it ever since.
So, not to give away age or anything like that, how long have you been a Titans fan now?
Oh my God, what are we in now? 2025, and I got into it in about 2009. So we're looking at a good 16 years now.
A good while. And you've had some, in those 16 years, there's been some real highlights. I mean, they've seen the Titans be the number 1 seeds in the AFC, and then you've had last year.
Yeah, highest of highs and lowest of lows. Well, I say highest of highs. We've obviously never won a Super Bowl. The closest we've got is a yard, quite literally 1 yard, which of course was in 2000 against the Rams, and that was absolutely heartbreaking. Probably even more so because it was the team that had, Steve McNair, and then the tragic story of what happened to him, C2K and Keith Bullock, and Jadavian Kearse, like the team that I think everyone really thinks of when they think of the peak Tennessee Titans team. And that was the first year as well, I think, that we were the Tennessee Titans. Before that, we'd obviously been the Houston Oilers and then the Tennessee Oilers, and how it all sort of developed like that. So, and then you look at where we are now, and there's like rock bottom 50 feet of sludge, and then us, I think. So thankfully, hopefully, the only way we can go is up, and yeah, they're trying, I think.
Yeah, they have been trying, and there's been, as a very nice tee up for me there's been a lot of changes in the last few months. There's a new quarterback, a new general manager. You've won the off-season with Schedule Rizzy as well, the schedule
Yeah.
release video, which was excellent. The Titans always seem to be the Chargers' main rival for this competition each year. So I think just because the Chargers are the only Minecraft one this year, we'll hand the prize over to you for this one with Schedule Rizzy, just for that 15 seconds where they slag off every other team
Yeah.
in really quick succession. I think it's brilliant. Let's start with the new general manager, because I know that's something you wrote about for the Huddle UK's website as well. It's a name, the surname, I always fear that I'm going to say it wrong. Mike Borgonzi, I think is how you say it. Um,
Yeah.
Someone who at the Chiefs did, brilliant work as the assistant general manager there, and has now into this draft got you your new quarterback, a few wide receivers potentially. I guess, what's your assessment of the offseason as a whole?
I think so far with Mike Borganzi, he's done really well. He's really shown, as you saw with the draft, how well he worked in scouting, because he did spend a lot of years doing the scouting for the Chiefs and stuff and looking at the players that they can get in, and that really showed. We had a really good draft. I'm really happy with how we drafted. And then combining that with Brian Callahan, you've obviously then got his father as well, who's on the team. We're bringing in all of these incredible players, and then we've still kept some of the core players from last season, like the incredible duo of Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat. They are my favourite duo in the entire team. They're absolutely fantastic. They're also, a strange fact, but they're also the heaviest duo in the entire league, coming in, I think it's just over, or it was just over 700 kilos between the two of them, which is like a baby elephant. So, but yeah, Jeffrey Simmons is he's gone to minicamp. He was back at minicamp today. He's dropped 20 pounds, I think it is. Oh my God, I said 700 kilos, 700 pounds, not 700 kilos. Oh my God, 700 pounds, 700 kilos is very different.
Yes, I knew we knew what you meant. You knew what you meant, yeah.
Oh my God, that's not a baby elephant, that's a herd of elephants. Oh my God. Yeah, 700 pounds. But yeah, he's dropped 20 pounds already. He's really working on his fitness so he can be quicker, and he can just be more agile as well. And then, we're combining that with obviously Cam Ward, who we've drafted. Tuesday was his best day so far at camp. I think it was 18 out of 21 completions. I'm still slightly skeptical until I see him play. Like any woman, I don't like to admit when I'm wrong. I'm not going to say I was wrong, but so far he's proving me not wrong, but not right. Is how we'll word it. So I think when the season starts is going to be the real test.
Yeah, not to just quickly, not to if Devondre Sweat or Jeffrey Simmons happened to listen to this podcast, and not 700 kilos. Sweat was 366 pounds and Simmons was 338 pounds last season. As you say, well, the heaviest duos in the middle of the
Yeah.
defense there is, but not a herd of elephants, just very, very big, stocky gentlemen
Yeah.
in pounds. Cam Ward, as you said, you don't like admitting you're wrong. That was actually the introduction to your story on the UK website
Yeah.
after they drafted Cam Ward, because you weren't enamored with his um behavior or mentality prior to the draft, were you?
No, there was a particular game. I can't remember if it was a pro day or the Rose Bowl or something, where he sort of reached the milestones he wanted to reach, and then he sat the rest of the game out. And it's like, I understand you're not wanting to injure yourself before the combine. You're wanting to show the best you can be. You may be wanting to let other people have a turn as well. But when you're trying to impress all 32 teams, now is not maybe the time to do it. And it just seemed like it. Yeah, I wasn't 100% happy with it, but I know the team won anyway. I think if the team had lost, I'd have been even more unhappy. But seeing how he is with the other players, and then obviously we've got in Xavier Restrepo, the undrafted free agent. There's a lot of talk around him. Those two played together as well, so there's already that relationship there that they can hopefully build on. Although I was reading today, there are some question marks about whether or not Restrepo is actually gonna play for the Titans, or whether he's going to be on the 53-man roster. So that's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Because Calvin Ridley is the very obvious wide receiver one there at the moment, and he is a very,
100%.
very good player. The rest is a real odd bunch of players now in
Yeah.
Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, who's been around the block, Traylon Burks, who even not as a Titans fan, as someone who took him in many dynasty leagues. I dread to think how you see him. He annoys me from the outside looking in. Then you've got 2 4th-round picks in DK and Ayamanor. So yeah, Restrepo, I've heard there's been a lot of buzz about, but as you say, it's going to be a tough ask for him to make that roster.
Yeah, 100%. I really like. I can't pronounce his name either. A Yemenor. I really like him. I'm really excited to see what happens with him. And as awful as it sounds, I would rather have him over someone like Traylon Burks, because Burks just hasn't lived up to the potential and all the hype that surrounded him. And I was really frustrated actually that we got rid of Nick Westbrook-Akine. He had an incredible season with us, and they could have really worked something out. And instead, he's gone to a team that are going to appreciate that. And I just hope, even though he's not with us anymore, he had as good of a season, because it was fantastic last year.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw my friend under the bus a little bit. Every Sunday, me and 3 other friends, including Jake, who's the Bills writer for the website, we all pick one player who we think is going to score a touchdown, and we put a little bet on it for all 4 of them. We were rubbish at it last season. I think only once did we get it all right. But I think it was Westbrook-Akine who went on a run of scoring in 9 out of 10 weeks. And the only week my friend Tom picked him was the one week he
Oh, no.
didn't score. So he's kind of been like blacklisted on our bets now, just because
Yeah.
we were a bit cursed when we picked him. Yeah, and going back to Alec Ayamanor, who's a name I'm hoping I'm saying that right. He seemed to have everything in terms of the physicality, but his drops was so painful in college. I think it was Rich at Dynasty Ireland a couple of weeks ago who was saying, for a player who can't catch the ball, he's been really highly drafted. That's
Yeah.
something you're going to need to do in the NFL. But I guess the physical traits are all there. I just hope it's not another Jonathan Mingo was at the Panthers.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to the preseason. I enjoy the preseason anyway, but I think because our roster is so heavily stacked with so many options at the minute, the preseason's really going to help to sort out who to keep, who not to, maybe switch some positions up, things like that. Because yeah, there's so much going on, and maybe pitting them against other players at that next level up is going to help weed it out a little bit.
Looking at the schedule, it's the Broncos at Mile High to start, which I think is going to be as tough a game as it comes for a new offense against one of the best defenses in the league. Then the Rams, and then you got a couple divisional games then against the Colts and the Texans. I don't want to get too early into your season predictions, but looking at that early run, it's not the easiest for Camwell to settle in.
It's not, but I'm glad it's happening at the beginning when it's still recoverable, instead of, we're hitting sort of week 12 or something, and then we've got this run. And if you lose them at that point, you've lost the season. There's probably no preseason for you. So for it to happen now, it sucks, and it is really going to put Ward to the test. But we can recover from it this early. It's more the divisional ones where we ideally need to win them because of the impact that they can have on standings.
I'm going to have a quick grab it up now of what our poll is over on X. We've got a poll going at the moment all week on who people think will win the AFC South. Interesting. Okay. It's still going live. So at the time that this comes out on Saturday, this could be very different. But at the time of recording, the Texans are very clearly the most popular pick. But the Jaguars are narrowly ahead of the Titans for second, and the Colts are way down in last place. The article that's currently on the NFL website is from worst to first, and it lists the Titans as one of the 3 teams who have the potential of going from bottom of their division to top. Not that they're saying it's likely, but it's in the realms of possibility. I think personally, looking from the outside in, that's a bit optimistic. What about yourself?
I think it is a bit optimistic, especially again, like we've said, with how many new players, how many changes. But if we can do better than last year, and then maybe really make a push and get us in the position we need to be, so that next season, the season obviously afterwards, 2027, that we can then destroy the rest of the division. Like, let's not be nice about it, and we've done it before. It wasn't that long ago when we had Marcus Mariota. We went on that bad run of games. They put in Ryan Tannehill, who, for all intents, but he did not have a great season when he was with Miami. He was subpar for a quarterback, maybe. And we brought him in, and everyone, myself included, was very skeptical. And we played him, and we went on a run for the next few seasons. That was fantastic. And we were through to the playoffs every single season. So if we can do something like that, even if it's not with this first year, but we can get in a good enough position that we don't need to draft like a complete overhaul of, you know, the defense, the offense, especially anything like that, but just a few key players to then really make the push for the following season, I think I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, you had those 2 years in 2020, 2021 when you won the division, including as the number one seeds, as I mentioned, in 2021. Other than that, it's not been great for Tennessee. There's so many second places in the divisions. Last year was abysmal, as we said at the top, 3-14, one home win, 6 losses to end the season. If you're looking for improvement this year, what is the pass mark, I guess, for the Titans? How many wins would be an acceptable improvement in your eyes?
I think if we could double our wins from last year, which I don't think is an unreasonable ask given how many games we have in the season now. So I think, you know, if we can get at least 6, maybe more, I would be amazed if we got into double digits. I'm not expecting it. It would be fantastic if we did. But whether we do or whether we don't, let's be honest, every Sunday Titans fans have a reason to drink. Because if we lose, we'll have a beer. If we win, we'll have a beer. And then we'll complain about it for the rest of the week.
And that's why we all love the sport, isn't it? Any excuse to have a pint at the end of a Sunday or during a Sunday or at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, you know, whenever it suits and whenever the game is on. I, I, I could be wrong here, and I might need to edit this out if I'm wrong, but there are no primetime games for the Titans this year, are there?
No, I think there's 3 of us. I think is it us, the Browns, and there's one other team. It might be the Chargers, maybe.
Definitely not. It's definitely not us because I know we play primetime week 2 against the Raiders.
Yeah, I think it's us, the Browns, and I'm sure there's another
The
team,
Saints. I
the
just looked
Saints,
at the
and we
Saints.
don't have a single prime time. And I think, given the fact that we finished last, so we had the number 1 overall draft pick, we've drafted really well. He's got to be the most underappreciated, untalked about number 1 draft pick in the history of the draft, and then to not even have a single prime time game, like, it makes no sense. Like, I don't know if you watch Good Morning Football.
I do.
So, love a bit of Good Morning Football, you know, especially when Kyle Brandt and he gets going and he goes on one of his rants and you have like the angry scepter, and he went on a rant about this, and like I said, it makes absolutely no sense. And for the fans who haven't seen it, it's on the Tennessee Titans Facebook page. There's like a little clip of it. It's a couple of minutes long, and he says, like, you know, a breadcrumb, a morsel, something. Give us like a double header straight afterwards, after the prime time. He's like, give us something. But it's like, to have absolutely nothing when you've got such an anticipated young man who is hopefully going to become the face of the franchise. It very much feels like a snub.
Yeah, that week 3 game against the Colts, because they've got such a quarterback dilemma. We're going to get onto that in a moment in this episode. That felt like a perfect opportunity. Your number 1 pick against Daniel Jones or, you know, the rebirth of Anthony Richardson. That felt like a great opportunity for one. But hey, what do we know? We're on this side of the pond. The NFL schedulers have got their own things in mind, I'm sure. Aimee, thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure to chat to you. Hopefully it won't be first up next year. Maybe you'll be second or third.
Who knows? And good Lord, if we're first again, you'll be looking at me crying instead, because it'll be like, why us again? Why us? But until then, hopefully we have a wonderful season, and it's been very good to talk to you.
Yeah, lovely to talk to you. And you can read all of Aimee's opinions about the Titans over at the HuddleUK website, of course, as well. That's enough Titans. We're going to have to move on to the team that was third. So we're going to move up one place, only one more win, of course, as well. And that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, up next, as we just touched upon, is the Jacksonville Jaguars with just one more win than the Tennessee Titans last year. 4-13 record, a really disappointing season. It started all right. Joining us is the HuddleUK's Jags writer, Thomas Woollard. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. It wasn't a great 2024 for the Jags, was it?
That's an understatement of the century. Yeah, it really didn't go to plan. We had well, me personally as a fan had so much hope for kind of the Pedersen project and its kind of what I was hoping was its infancy, but turned out to be its final year of the experiment. Yeah, I mean, when you lose that many games, I think it was an NFL high of 10 games lost by 1 score or less, and you know that's a franchise high as well. So you can't go around playing football like that. That's pretty much the end. the be all and end all of that.
And obviously the disaster, let's say, if you don't want the understatement, that was 2024 has been, well, the attempts of the building blocks there have been put in place now to try and recover from that. That includes a new massive weapon on both sides of the ball, a new head coach. Let's start with the head coach. Let's start with Liam Cohen. That was a bit of a saga with the Buccaneers. We spoke to Ollie Santos, the Bucks writer, a couple of weeks ago when we did the NFC South. He felt like it was a little bit underhanded the way it was all dealt with. Your nod there would suggest that you feel the same, but the smile on your face because you got the guy.
Yeah, I'm not exactly going to say I'm not delighted. So yeah, commiserations to our Bucks writer. But what I think the kind of main, not to sidestep the question too much, but I think the main issue with how that went is that Cone didn't think that we'd make the moves to get him. Because I think, and I don't have the evidence to back this up. I'm sure at some point in the future I'll find the evidence and I can go, I told you all. But I think there was a kind of a, if you're going to keep your general manager, if you're going to keep everything the same, then I can't do this. And when you see how quickly the Jags moved from the position of everybody is set in stone, we are just hiring for a new coach, and suddenly it's everybody out the door, all panic stations. We need new coaches, new coordinators. We will do everything heaven and earth to get our guy. I know that phrase has been kind of used to death, but it's true. I mean, they moved so quickly. Within 3 days, you had general manager gone. You had new contacts being made with Cone, basically going, please, please come back. We'll make the accommodations. So I really do feel that we, as an organisation, we haven't always done things great. I think that is genuinely one of the best things that we've ever done in terms of like a reset, a proper reset to kind of rebuild for the future.
Yeah, and a lot of what he said since arriving really, if I was a fan of the Jags, would make me really happy alongside a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. It's the acronym was FAST, wasn't it? He wants,
Yeah.
let me click it here, fundamentally sound, attacking, situational masters, and tough. That, he's really hitting all the buzzwords there of what you want. The flip side is he did come out with the cringiest moment in franchise history with
Yeah.
his Duval, which was
I think we've certainly learned that, that's something that has to be, I work in marketing, right? So there is a certain PR training element before you put someone in front of a microphone. And yeah, if you want to get my impression of that, I'm not doing it because I do not want to be going anywhere viral. But yes, it was one of the worst things I thought, we've got a great head coach here, really going to get somewhere with this. You come out with that, and suddenly my opinion kind of, I have a slight doubt now.
it was just that every single schedule release video had that clip or that impression in. Nobody is going to let him forgive that, but it will be easily forgiven if the season goes well. Let's talk about the draft. One of the biggest players in the draft, even though didn't go number one, I think Travis Hunter, you could argue, was the most talked about player going into the draft. There was because I guess there was a bit more question marks over where he was landing. Everyone knew Cam Ward was going to go number one to the Titans. The Jags just moved. Did you watch the draft live? Were you
Did, yeah.
like, I stood up when they were like the trade, and I was like, oh wow, who's this going to be? When they said it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, what was your initial immediate reaction?
It was kind of twofold. I mean, the first thing was I was very surprised that Cleveland agreed. That to me is just a shock to the system at that point because I was like, as you said, who have we traded up for? And is this really? I mean, we lost our first round pick from next year's draft for it, so this has to work. Like, this isn't something we can go, oh, we're going to get a player and then we're going to be able to kind of rebuild, next year as well. We have given up, and I think it's kind of understated in the media at the minute. We've given up that pick. Like, that is a big, bold thing to do because nobody else. I mean, like, speak to any team, next year that has like a high, low number first round pick. They're really going to be holding on to those picks for dear life. They're not going to be trading them away. So I think that was the first thing. I mean, the second thing is obviously we've got probably, as you say, the most talked about player in the draft. I think also I'd like to say one of the most talented from a perspective of playing on both sides of the ball. I think my kind of my kind of hesitance over Travis Hunter, and this is not a hot take. I think he's a great player, and having seen a lot of the OTA videos that Jacksonville have put out, obviously they're only going to show the good bits. I get that, but also at the same time, there's a lot of media coverage around. Oh, he's fumbled a reception. He must be, he must be bad at, right, wide receiver. I'm like, right, I think we can all just calm down a minute. I've certainly fumbled a football before. It's not like you can't expect it to happen. But anyway, kind of back to the point. Like, I, I feel that Jacksonville, whilst we need versatility, we also need um single position prowess is what I want to call it. So despite having somebody who can play on both sides of the ball, I think we need to have those, as Cohn put it, situational masters. And to me, as a Jags fan, kind of looking on at that particular moment, which was a very kind of, as you said, stand out your seat, what we're doing here, moment. I'm not sure if I would have preferred, like, obviously in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. But I'm not sure if I would have preferred a single, either offense or defensive player, because I think this could cause a few tensions down the road in terms of, does Travis Hunter feel like he's getting a fair amount of time on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball? He wants to play on both sides. He's made that very clear. And we've made it very clear from an organizational perspective that we expect you mainly to play on the offensive side, but we will give you time on the defensive side. So I feel like we've got a great player. There's no doubt about that. I think it's more the balance that we get on the offense and the defense that is really going to dictate how much of a generational player he becomes.
My biggest concern, and I've said this on more than one of these podcasts, is not about his talent level. To give up next year's first, I think if the Jags have their ceiling season this year, it would be close to double-digit wins. I don't think it's going to be this 13, 12-win season. So the first-round pick next year might be a middle round first pick. It could be, if it all goes wrong, like another early pick. And you've given that up for a player who can play both sides of the ball. But to do that at NFL, it's to do it at college level is one thing, and mightily impressive. And I think a big chunk of the reason he won the Heisman Trophy over Ashton Genty. But to do that in the NFL feels like you're risking a player at a young age blowing up due to just the number of snaps he's been playing. And then if you look at him as just a wide receiver or just a cornerback, he's not worth the second overall pick if he's only allowed to play one of those positions. He's drafted that highly because he can play both. And I think the biggest negative is if he plays both significantly, he's going to be sidelined more than he can play. So that's my concern for the Jags. If he never got injured and played both sides of the ball, this might be one of the best picks in it, or moves to go get him in draft history. But
I mean, if he stopped dancing all the time, I'd be a little bit more. I'm a little bit more concerned about the amount of dancing he's doing because imagine his touchdown celebrations. If he injures himself doing that, I don't think I'm ever going to forgive the Jacksonville organization.
No creative dancing, celebrate, like hand in the air.
Celebrate, fine, high fives, whatever. Please don't try anything, any malarkey that we don't need. Like we want to win. That's what we want to do at the end of the day.
Show him the old Alan Shearer football celebration, just finger in the air, just
finger in the air. That's it. Like move on.
easy, nothing creative. On the wide receivers, this is another thing that I've been very much on the record saying on this podcast. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is the next dude. Like the way that people talk about Chase and Jefferson, I think next year or this time next year, when people are talking about those two, he will be the next person in that conversation. He had everything for me last year. I was at the London game. I'm not sure if the one at Wembley against the Patriots. No, there wasn't a very good Patriots team. We all saw that. They were pretty useless for the entire game.
Didn't mind the win.
No, of course.
At that point, I just took the win.
One of the 4 wins of the season. You've got to be pleased that you were there for it. But Brian Thomas Jr. that day was just electric. He wins at every level of the field. I don't know if there's any negatives that I would put against him at this point.
Yeah, I really don't. I think with obviously the addition of Travis Hunter and also Brian Thomas Jr. now, I mean, like we have one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting, wide receiver duos in the NFL. I would pretty much argue with anyone on that. So I think that game in London, especially, he really did show what he could do. As you said, it was one of the one of the 4 wins of the season. So we've got to look at it in that perspective. And it was a really good performance. Not just, I mean, obviously Thomas Jr. was the the standout, but Parker Washington and other players. I mean, it was something to behold. It really was. So I thought at the moment our season might be turning around at that point. Didn't turn out that way, but yeah,
I think Tack Bixby got 2 touchdowns that day as well, if my
I
memory
think he
serves.
did. Yes, yeah,
Actually, that's one thing I hadn't put on my list that I do want to talk about. Very early on in the series of this Huddle UK podcast, we had Chris Trapasso on, who's CBS's draft expert. And in his first mock draft, he had the Chargers taking Bashal Tutin in the first round, and people went absolutely mental. People lost their heads. They're like, he's not a first round prospect. And he wasn't. He still went in the 4th round. But Chris has been riding this Bashal Tutin horse for months now. And then when he had the quickest 40 time and was the most athletic running back in the draft, he kind of put out a few posts on X going, mark my words. There's another YouTuber I love called Benchwarmer Brand who does lots of like short form content about the NFL. And he was talking about Bashal Tutin, and he was saying, an athletic 4th round running back under Liam Cohen who goes to a team where the other running backs on the roster haven't cemented their spot, and then it just pans to Bucky Irving. And that's what happened last year for Tampa.
yeah.
I'm kind of, he keeps saying toot toot in the videos, which I'm not going to do in mine, but he kind of is really high on Bashal too, and I've heard a few people are as well. For me, the question is more, do you still believe in Travis Etienne? And do you think Tank Bigsby, if Etienne isn't the dude, can lead a backfield on his own?
I think I want to answer that with the game, which was Miami Dolphins, where we had, I think it was Etienne who had the fumble in the Dolphins end zone. I'm pretty sure. So I want to leave it there really in the sense of that Etienne is a very good player. Like nobody's going to doubt that. But there's a couple of mistakes that certainly happened last season that are uncharacteristic of him as a player. And I'm not saying that's someone's reached their peak or anything like that, but I feel like we have to start taking that into consideration. I personally, I do trust Tank Bigsby. I think that he would be an excellent leader for that side. I really don't. I understand, obviously, other people having their own opinions on different running backs. But from what I've seen of Tank, I feel like he's got the resilience to lead that, even if Etienne is not there. Or I know there was some talk recently about him being traded, and I think that has been shut down by Jacksonville fairly succinctly, much in the same way that I'm not sure if you remember the Trevor Lawrence to Pittsburgh Steelers was shut down very quickly. So I feel like we're going to have ETN, and I just hope that we eliminate those mistakes. I think.
So you've really put a downer on my Bashal too and hype there.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but yeah.
I just looking it up. I mean, Etienne's yards per carry has dropped in every single season he's had, whereas Bigsby is up to 4.5 last season. So they just feel like, to me, players on different trajectories. I could be wrong. I don't know. Let's wrap up with, of course, I always do hopes and dreams for next year. Then, as I said, it was 4 wins last season. At the moment, on the Huddle UK's poll on Twitter, the Jags are the second most popular team for the vote for who will win the division, which I'm slightly surprised by. The Texans are far and away leading that poll. What's the ceiling? What's the floor? What's your message to the other fans of the other teams? Do you really believe now that Lawrence can? I don't think he'll ever hit the ceiling of what people thought he would when he was drafted, but do you still believe in him as well, that he can carry this team to win in the division next year?
So I think when you speak about the floor, I mean, we all know 0 wins is a possibility. We don't want to be going there. But when you look at our fixtures, it is not a gentle introduction to the season. Other than the Panthers, which you would hope is an easy win, myself. If it's not, I really do have sincere trouble for this season. But, you've got Bengals, Texans, 49ers, Chiefs. That's your next games. That is not a gentle introduction in any sense of the word. We have, as I'm sure everybody is going to be aware, beef with the Texans after what happened with Lawrence last time. So that's definitely going to be a game to watch. I genuinely do believe in this team and the organisation and who we've got. James Gladstone inexperience aside, I think he is a strategic mastermind. If I'm honest, I think what he's done so far, and just really getting everyone on the same page. When you put together that with Liam Cohn, the fact that they've worked together before, the fact that they all know like what the ethos is they're going for. That aside, I'm not going to be here and saying, we're going to get 17 wins, but I am going to make a bit of a hot take here. So I think we are going to win the division.
Clip it.
I think we are going to win the division. And if I think that is mainly down to the fact that we've had Pedersen, who had that one season where we got into the playoffs, and then we had the biggest comeback in, what is it, NFL history, is it, in the playoff?
We don't talk about that game on this channel. Not to me.
Yeah, we do. Don't worry. We
Cardiff fan,
absolutely do.
don't talk about it. And that game did not happen. Yeah.
So we had that, obviously that kind of big high, and then obviously the next season we had the quarterback sneak that didn't pan out, and we've had kind of massive highs and massive lows, and I really do think the team we've got together, if it comes together, it's going to gel well. Not like as a 8-9 team. I don't think it's going to gel like that. I think if we get to London and we are, let's say, 3-2, something like that, I'd be happy. Like, that's where I'd be at London. And London previously has been a very good kind of assessment of our kind of trajectory, other than last year, which was the anomaly, where everything just went downhill. But it's typically been a bit of a turning point for us. And I think having that as like a mental mindset of, right, we're in London, we're playing the Rams, get the win on the board, because our record in London is quite good. I reckon we could get that, and we could really go forward from there. But I'm not going to sit here and say, we're going to get 70-0, but I do think we're going to win the division, and I think we're going to take the fight to the Texans.
Hot take. I absolutely love it. And Thomas, I'll hopefully see you in London. We'll be arranging HuddleUK meetups, so I'm sure you'll be going down again. That'll be a good. I think the Rams-Jags game has the potential to be the best international game. I think the one in Madrid, the Dolphins-Commanders, is a close second in that race. I think those two are going to be really interesting games, and hopefully it will be. Hopefully it will be. The two games last year, the Bears game was a bit naff. I'm sure.
I didn't go and see that one. I had a choice between the two, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and see the Patriots because I feel like we might win.
Like that both games for work, and spoke to Doug Pedersen after both, and he was a very different human being after the two, as you can imagine, very downbeat, and then the next week absolutely elated. But then it was 5 more defeats on the bounce after that. So you don't talk about that. I don't talk about the playoffs, particularly when the Chargers play AFC South teams, because it's just, it just goes wrong.
This doesn't tend to go well for you, does it?
Thomas, it's been a pleasure. You can go read all of Thomas's stuff, of course, over on the HuddleUK website. We're going to move on now to the team that was second last year. It was the Indianapolis Colts. Well, up next, we're going to talk Indianapolis Colts with the HuddleUK's Colts writer, Ed. Ed, who's also recently been massively helping me out alongside Sean, the Bengals writer, subbing and getting articles on the website. Ed, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good, man. Really, really good. Thank you. What about yourself?
Yeah, very well, very well. As we were just talking about slightly off camera there, it's been a busy time. It is that sort of time of year as well. So, yeah, it's not a busy time, however, really, in the NFL. It's kind of that stage of the season. We're in a bit of a lull, but there's still plenty to talk about. And the Colts have had an interesting off-season. I don't know where to start. Let's start with the draft itself.
Okay.
You were one of the, I think, 6 HuddleUK writers who correctly predicted the player that their team would draft in the HuddleUK's mock draft, myself included in that. Tyler Warren, I think you wrote about 3 articles about him before the draft, about how excited you were. It was such an obvious hole on the roster for the Colts was tight end. And they've got, he was the second tight end drafted, actually, after Colston Loveland, but he was your guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, from the get go, I think there was a lot of pre-draft debate, as there often is, isn't there, at this time of year? Like you say, people talking about players and fits, and every man and their dog could see that the Colts were desperate for help at the tight end position, and then it was just a case of sort of pick your favourite. I like Tyler Warren. I'm not going to pretend I'm a college expert, but obviously I enjoy when the draft comes around. You start scouting players that your team are maybe linked with. You start looking at the numbers, and really, really liked what I saw with Tyler Warren and what he could potentially bring to the team. And was delighted that he sort of landed in our lap almost a little bit.
I had Rich Cooling on, who's at Dynasty Island, the big sort of fantasy football guru, on a couple of weeks ago. He described Tyler Warren, I hope not to misquote him here, as a theoretical player. He was sort of alluding to the fact he only really has one great year of college numbers, and he's a bit old. He's not old. I look at these people now, 22, 23, and I say, oh, a bit old, and then I remember I'm in my 30s, so it's a bit hypocritical. But 23, he's a slightly older prospect than someone like Colston Loveland. Do you have the same concerns that others have with him?
I appreciate the thought process about one sort of great year. I hear what people are saying there, but the age doesn't concern me at all. If anything, I think that just shows he's got more tread on the tire, as it were. He's got more experience, and I think that counts for a lot now coming out of college. We're seeing players that are coming in maybe a little bit too soon, and I think it's hard to kind of figure it out at the top level. So I certainly don't have an issue with him being a bit older and then spent more time in college. Doesn't bother me at all. No, and the way Coach Steichen spoken about him already, the sort of do it all. You mentioned the word hypothetical player there. I think Shane Steichen's really excited to get him on board and draw up some plays for him, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like.
And while he was playing for Penn State, not to beat down on the Colts, but he took a fair few snaps, sort of direct snaps. Given your quarterback situation at the moment, that might not be a bad thing that he's got some practice.
Yeah, absolutely. He's I saw that as well. Who knows? Let's see. I hope the plans that Steichen has for him doesn't extend to that, but you never know, do you? You never know.
I'm going to put a bet on seeing Tyler Warren throw at least one pass this season. The rest of the draft, it was a defensive end in the second round. The quarterback in the third round was the one that kind of raised a couple of eyebrows, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'd gone to bed by that point. And I woke up the next morning and, to see who we're taking in the third. There was a lot of talk about linebacker being a position of need. So I thought that might be an area that we'd be looking for. So I was surprised when we took a corner, especially after we got Javarius Ward in the off-season. It was a position of need last year. It was a real position of need, but we seemed to sort of somewhat address it. So it was a little bit of a surprise, and it was also maybe a few questions that he may have been overdrafted in the third round. There's a lot of people saying that his grading was sort of a lot lower, but Chris Ballard said that he was the player they wanted. I'd have to assume that Lou Anarumo had a say in that. And again, you have to kind of trust the process to a certain extent, don't you? But I agree, it definitely raised an eyebrow or two. Not only the overdrafting, but the positional need. I didn't see that at the time before it happened.
I'm not sure if you gave the Colts a sort of a grade. That's kind of everyone in American media's favorite thing to do, is post-draft give a grading. Your headline was Draft Day Delight. I think that sort of sums up how you were feeling with it. If you had to grade it, how would you feel now? You've had I guess what's it now, some 6-7 weeks on from the draft.
Yeah, I think, funny enough, talking of gradings, I've just got my daughter's school report, and they've changed all the gradings now from letters to numbers. So I don't really understand what's going on. Yeah, it used to be A, B, C. Yeah, and now it's all numbers. So I don't really understand. So I'm looking at it, trying to understand if she's got a good report or not. So going on that, I'll stick to the old school letters. I'm fairly happy with the draft. I think that there were a lot of needs addressed. I know we've talked about the first three picks, but Ballard is always going to try and draft for the trenches. We know that. A good option at offensive tackle, another running back, which we needed help with, a quarterback who may or may not get some snaps this year, depending how the year goes. So yeah, look, it's difficult to say, and with hindsight, in 12 months, it could look like an absolute disaster class. It could look like a masterclass, because you never really know how players are going to adapt. But I would say, on the whole, we've addressed a lot of needs. I'd be happy to give it a solid B+ as things stand at the moment.
B+.
A solid B+.
This
I'd
is
be
not
happy with that.
This is not the topic of conversation I thought I'd be having. I want to know about the numbers though quickly. What does it go
Right.
up to? 10 or
9. So it goes up to 9. So
9?
it goes from 1 to 9, 9 being the highest. 9 now is apparently an A plus plus or an A star star.
World's
Because
gone mad.
the world has gone mad because, like I say, I've got this report and it's like, oh, you're at this level. And obviously, I won't read our grades out for the whole world to hear, but you're at this level. And I'm just sitting there going, is this good? Is this bad? Is this a pass? That I've had to Google it and look it all up. So, yeah. But apparently, she's doing all right. So,
Well, people say that the world is as divided as it's ever been, and suddenly I understand why. This grading in numbers. No, that's
no,
where I
it's
draw
not.
the line.
Yeah. Well, I just look forward to if you're ever in a position when you have to hire somebody in sort of 10 years' time, when you're looking at their GCSE results, trying to figure out whether or not it's good or bad.
I've got 2 6s and a 7.
Yeah. Well, okay, great. What does that mean?
Right, we're going to steer the ship back on course.
Sorry.
Quarterback. Anthony Richardson currently dealing with a shoulder injury at the time that we're speaking. I don't know what side of the fence you fall on this, but I think that gives an early advantage to Daniel Jones, but that probably isn't what Colts fans want.
No, in all honesty, it's not. I mean, obviously, I can't talk on behalf of the entire fan base, but I will give my opinion is that no, I don't think it is. Daniel Jones is a good, serviceable NFL standard quarterback, and we've seen what he can do. And yeah, he can perform at an NFL level. Is he the player that's potentially going to elevate your side to the next level? That is very much jury out after 6 or 7 years in the NFL. Anthony Richardson, to me, I don't want to sound like some sort of fanboy, but to me, Anthony Richardson is sort of almost like the prototype athletic specimen that you would want a modern day NFL quarterback to look like. You know, he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he's got a cannon of an arm. He needs to work on a few things, absolutely. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he doesn't. But the injury is a blow because the quarterback battle was positioned as that. It's a battle. Both players are coming into this with an equal chance. Everything that I was listening to, media from the outside looking in, it sounded like Daniel Jones, everybody thought that the job was for Daniel Jones. Funnily enough, from the inside looking out, from a lot of the Colts sort of podcasts and fans that you speak to online, you see on your own sort of feeds and stuff, very much that it was Anthony Richardson's job to lose. So I think that shows you that it was very much a split, but you could probably see where the fan base was leaning. We were promised this sort of unicorn quarterback a couple of years ago, and it hasn't quite come to fruition yet. And I don't think any fan is quite ready to give up on that dream as of yet. The injury comes at the most horrendous time. Interestingly, when Daniel Jones signed, a lot was made about the fact that he thought that he'd be able to beat out Anthony Richardson for the job, and this is why he's come to Indianapolis and turned down staying at Minnesota Vikings because didn't think they'd be able to beat out JJ McCarthy. I think a lot more of it wasn't necessarily down to him thinking he could win the job necessarily on the field. It's going to sound really bad, but more to do with the fact that Anthony Richardson hasn't yet proven that he can stay healthy for a long enough stretch, and therefore he is probably going to get an opportunity to play at some point. And obviously, once you're the man in position, it's then your job to lose, isn't it? So I think that there is an element of it's definitely advantage Daniel Jones. I would be surprised as things stand now, where are we sort of the early beginning of June. I would be surprised if it's anything other than Daniel Jones starting under centre for Indianapolis when the season gets underway in Miami, as things stand at this moment in time.
Interesting, cool. So yeah, you just said it's Miami to start, then Denver, then you've got the first divisional game against the Titans.
Yeah.
And then the Rams and Raiders are going to be 2 difficult teams this season. It's not the easiest start to the season.
It's not, and I think the first 2 games, because Miami are an interesting one to start off with, because I know they're having a bit of an interesting time themselves, but Miami's not a team you want to play sort of straight off the bat because they come flying out of the blocks, really, don't they? Miami. I had a chat about this with some Colts fans recently, talking about where do we think we'll be after the first 4 games? 2-2 realistically. 3-1 would be sort of ideal. I think the Rams is a difficult game. I really like the Rams. And like I say, the Raiders are much improved. Looking through the schedule, I suppose the concerning thing as a fan is when you start looking at games and you start all fans are the same. I'm not trying to be arrogant, but all fans look at games and you think that, that's a game we fancy ourselves in. That's a game that we think we could win. That's going to be tricky. We do that sort of mental in our head, don't we? And we always come out of a 10-7 record. But when you start looking at the schedule from a Colts perspective, and you start looking, you're thinking actually more of these games are difficult than not. Maybe that gives you an indication of where your own team is at the moment, if that makes sense. And I think that's the realism that I've kind of dawned on myself when I looked at the schedule, because you're right. I don't think it's the worst, but it's definitely, from a Colts perspective, it's not the easiest.
I enjoyed in your story on the Huddle UK website where you said it's far too early to predict with any degree of confidence, as we're still in May, how the season will go out. That being said, we can all dream of a perfect season. The Colts are going 17-0 and winning the lot, which, hey, good dream big,
If you can't be optimistic about your team at this time of the year, then when can you be? You got to at least let sort of training camp get underway before you start bursting those bubbles and going, oh, actually, maybe we might lose 1 or 2 this year, but we're still going all the way.
What is your realistic hopes, though?
My realistic ambition up until probably 2-3 days ago was the same as what it was last year, which was I would love to see Anthony Richardson take a massive step forward and solidify himself as QB1 and, more importantly, QB for the future. This was the same ambition I had at the start of last year, pretty much, by the way. And also that the Colts make a run, a meaningful run at the playoffs, at the postseason, because it's been too long. Now, out of those two sort of ambitions, last year one was a lot closer than the other. We kind of toyed with the postseason for a little bit, and Richardson really hasn't taken that step forward. I say up until a couple of days ago, because now obviously the shoulder injury, that's kind of put a spanner in the works on that particular side of it. There's still going to be question marks about whether or not Richardson is our quarterback for the future, but the ambition in terms of making a meaningful run for the playoffs has to be the ambition. If the Colts don't make the postseason this year, I think there's going to be a potential changing of the guard, shall we say. I think that there are some people on warm seats in the building at the moment, I think is fair to say.
And the Colts, just final topic, playing in Berlin, the first Berlin game. I saw initially you put on, because I didn't say this at the start, and I should have certainly said this at the start, that you've got your own account and Colts sort of website. It's at Colts_GB over on X.
Yeah.
Did you get tickets in the end?
No, so at the moment I haven't got tickets yet. So I've been offered tickets. I can potentially get tickets. Essentially what happened was I went through the joys that all fans do when the European games start, which I sat in a queue for Ticketmaster for all day. It felt like I was at work in a training session. I had my phone on my desk. Got to the point where I was next in the queue. My manager even stopped the training session, said, Ed's now next in the queue. Let's just let him get his tickets. And I got booted out of the queue just as I was about to get my tickets. By the time I got back in, the cheapest seats I could see were €285, which is fine. It's a lot of money, and the money side of it is very subjective. I know it's an emotive subject, and I don't want to kind of say something that offends or is wrong on this point. But the point for me is I want to take my 10-year-old son with me. 2 tickets at €285 plus flights and hotel is proving very prohibitive cost-wise at the moment. Not saying it's one of those. I have to decide. I have to think long and hard about whether or not I want to commit that money, essentially. And I don't want to not. I could go on my own, of course I could, but I've promised my son. Then that's difficult as a father to kind of say, yeah, you're not coming, but I'm still going on my own. And it's a lot of money to commit, which again, I don't want to sound like, I can do it. It's just whether or not I want to commit that money to it, if that makes sense. So I'm just waiting to see if any resale come up for sort of cheaper price. If not, it will get to about August. The FOMO will kick in, and I'll just book it anyway and think, sod it, I'm going to Berlin for a long weekend. But either way, the Colts will be in Berlin. Whether I'm there or not is to be decided. But I'd like to hope I'd like to hope that maybe some sort of resale ones come up a little bit lower. The cost is what the cost is, essentially. But it's just demoralising when I was in the queue and I could have got them at sort of, I think I priced it would have been about 200 and something euros for both of us, to then sort of be offered a sort of nearly 600 euros. It's a bit sort of galling, isn't it? You know what I mean?
It's certainly caused a lot of people have been up in arms about it, and I do understand why.
Yeah, I do as well.
Just final question then before we move on to the final team, the Texans. How do you, but we've got to put you on the spot. How do you think the division will finish in 2025 in terms of the order of the four teams? Because of course you've got Cam Ward now, new quarterback at the Titans. You've got Travis Hunter, this complete enigma
Yeah.
at the Jaguars. Two of the biggest players in this draft class landing in your division. I put out a poll that's going to be running all week on the HuddleUK's Twitter account of who will win the division. As things stand, the Colts are last in the voting. So, and that's even after you've retweeted it to your Colts following. So,
Damn it.
that might say something. So given that information, how do you think it stacks up?
I think I've hit my repost card too early. I think that's what's happened now. I've played the card too early. I don't think we'll finish last. I know what you're saying. I think the AFC South is a much maligned division. It gets a lot of, there isn't a juggernaut in the division. That's fair to say. The Texans have obviously been the closest thing, but they've not. They're not a juggernaut. No disrespect to them. I think the division is up for grabs this year. And I've said this several times, and I'll go on record saying it again. If the Colts can get anything above average quarterback play this year, I fancy us to win the division. And I really strongly believe that. And this is one of those, you need to clip this because come December time, it might come back and absolutely kill
You do
me.
not need to tell me twice.
But no, listen, I think you're right. The division it's better than people give it credit for. Another reason why I'm a little bit a little bit skeptical about Daniel Jones is you make a great point about Cam Ward coming in. The Jags have obviously got their QB for the future, and so have the Texans. Do I want Daniel Jones to be our guy going against them for the next 10 years? If I'm being honest, probably not. Travis Hunter is a problem. I was very annoyed with Cleveland for trading out of that position with Jacksonville on draft night. I'd rather he wasn't in the division as well. But I do think if you look through the Colts roster, it's more solid than people give it credit for. There might not be a lot of household names, but if you look at the roster as a rounded sort, there are holes in it. Don't get me wrong, but we have got some good options on offense now with Tyler Warren, the new tight end number 1 in the NFL. There are some other good options. The O-line is solid, needs a bit of work. Like I say, if we can get quarterback position sorted, I do fancy us to win the division. I do fancy that. I can see that happening.
I respect the optimism. Riley Leonard's going to carry you to the AFC South this year.
It's all about Riley Leonard.
It's all about Riley Leonard. Ed, thank you very much for joining us. As I said a moment ago, Ed is over on Twitter at Colts_GB. So go give him a follow if you're a Colts fan, or even if you're not. There's some great content over there as well. We're going to round off today's episode with the reigning champions team that knocked my team out of the playoffs last year, but we're not going to talk about that. So we're going to move on now and finish off with Houston. Well, rounding off today's episode is the current AFC South champions, the 10-7 last season Houston Texans. Our Houston Texans writer, Graham, is currently away on holiday, so we've had to call in reinforcements, and good reinforcements at that. We're joined by Euan from the Turn Up for What podcast. Euan, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for the time and the invite.
That's good to have you on. You've been doing the podcast since 2019, you were just saying as well. And for all the podcasts, there'll be links as well to go see Euan's podcast. So make sure you go check that out as well, particularly if you're a Houston Texans fan. It was a good season last year, wasn't it? 10-7 playoffs. You beat my team, the Chargers, in the playoffs as well. How would you assess how it was on the whole?
I was there in Kansas City on that fateful red zone drive where we got down with one score and found a way not to punch it in. It ends up being 4th and 10, I think, and turned it over. And yeah, I've not really been able to move on, I think. And it's kind of it's not necessarily disillusionment, but I think gross disappointment of a team that was obviously on the wane. You had a chance to go and beat them, particularly in a game where you ran the ball well in the second half, and you hadn't done that all season. It kind of felt like it was your time and it was clicking into place now. I suppose it's a team that lost games that it should never have lost, like Thursday night in New York, at home against Tennessee, 2 of the worst ones, and then there was some blowouts on Christmas Day, which is always a good way to create good relations in the household when you watch your team get embarrassed. But you know what? It was a good season in the sense that it was on par with the season prior. Suppose it was a sidestep. Did we get any closer to where we need to get to? Probably not, beyond the emergence of maybe Caelan Bullock, who's been a revelation, I suppose, in terms of interceptions. In terms of Kamari Lassiter being the number 2 corner, I think, and then you add CG Gardner-Johnson into that mix. I think you've got a potential defence moving into next year that was already, in the top so many. I think there's a real credible case this defence could be the best in the league this season coming. I don't think we really felt like we overperformed at any point last year. It was kind of stuttered in. That was built on the the lack of run game and the lack of protection in the passing game from an offensive line, which rightly so they've decided to blow up and fire the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach this summer. But yeah, I think look back on last season, but probably what could have been now. If we'd have got through, could we have beaten Buffalo? Maybe. We already beat them last year, and that was probably our only good win, or sort of statement, or close to a statement win. And they made Josh Allen look very average that day, showing the strength of his defense. So, you've got to hope there's some efficiencies and some improvements found. But I think that the things that were our strengths will continue to be our strengths, and the things that are weakness, I think, will continue to be our weakness.
You've made loads of points there that I want to get through. Firstly, I'd completely forgotten about that Christmas Day game until you just touched upon it.
Yeah.
That's not the one you want in the household.
No, you want with indigestion and Gaviscon's by your side. That's the last thing you need is watching you get physically dominated. I think that was probably the hardest thing about that game was it was just a physical domination by another team, and it looked like they wanted it more, and that's where you start to question. And I think never was the issues outlined more when Laramie Tunsil, who's now departed, posted about his cleats that got signed by Beyonce after he just got embarrassed on national television in front of many countries and many millions of people. So I think that probably showed you at the heart of some of the issues we had.
It's a stat that I've mentioned on this podcast a few times, but I remember seeing after the Super Bowl someone making a point that on average the amount of pressure that Patrick Mahomes faced in the Super Bowl, which was regular, was lower than the average of what CJ Stroud had been dealing with all season last season because of the offensive line. That was really the sticking point, wasn't it? Because as you say, the defense was good. I assume that you still have full trust in CJ Stroud, but when you don't have time to throw, it doesn't matter how good you are as a quarterback, does it?
When you saw all the issues, and I think when you get an unimposed runner, or an opposed runner rather, that runs through the middle of your offensive line, I don't really see how you could do anything more than try and scramble. And I think there was, it's particularly in the early games of the season. I think the Chicago on Monday Night Football springs to mind, and that was one where it was just ineffective for a couple of downs, and then all of a sudden you'd then go and find a scramble play, and it would go to Nico Collins, and then when Nico Collins got injured, that sort of reduced the efficacy of the offense, and he was kind of covered. The sort of connection between those two and broken plays really kind of kept us going. And he pulled his hamstring on the big long touchdown against Buffalo, I think it was, and he missed too many games. So, and a player like that is a real difference maker at this level. And I think there's not many that are of that ilk that can really dominate games, and if you get the ball in their hands enough, you're more than likely to win on that Sunday. But yeah, no, I think there was. Have you lost faith in him? No, I don't think so, because I think he did the best he could. Don't get me wrong. Was there some games where he was a bit off? Yeah, there was. But you can't expect everybody to be at the top of their game all the time. I think when you have no run game, when you're just got breakdowns of communication, when you genuinely every defensive coordinator through a stunt or a twist was going to get some form of pressure, if not a hit. In the trenches, it's ultimately you can't cover that up. There is no substitute for it, and particularly pressure up the middle. It's indefensible because you just can't get the ball out quick enough. Even if you're in shotgun, it's not functional. So yeah, no, I think has he got to improve some of the things that he's talked about, not necessarily achieve, i.e., taking what defenses give him and trying not to necessarily be too over expressive at times in terms of the kind of passes he wants to pick. I think there's been a mix of that. I think But when you get free pressures up the gut, consistency is probably a wishful thinking at that point. So can we get back to a point where the offense moves the chains with regularity? The third and longs that they face, as a result of those pressures that you mentioned, were unsustainable for any offense. So regardless if you had the best offense in the league, you consistently put yourself behind the chains. So they have to find a way to get round that, and that is by running the ball effectively. So whether they can do that or not, I don't know. If this squad wants to get where it gets to, and that is home field advantage in the playoffs, I think for a squad that's never won it, you need that as an absolute necessity if you want to get deep into it. We have to get there, and by getting there, you're probably going to have to win 13 or 14 games. So it's going to have to be more consistent over the piece to get to there. But that's the ultimate goal.
You mentioned a couple of times there that the run game was a struggle. I just looked it up. There was 8 games last season where whoever the top rusher was didn't even hit 50 yards on the ground. Mixon was the lead back. Now this week, as we're talking, you've just signed Nick Chubb, who obviously had that devastating injury a couple of years ago, came back for the Browns last year and had his moments, and not saying he looked as good as he did pre-injury. I mean, the injury, as I said, was absolutely horrific. Well, where do you stand on that as a sign? He's 29 years old now, Nick Chubb. If you've got the Nick Chubb pre-injury, you'd obviously be delighted. But is this someone who you think is going to elevate the backfield?
Yeah, I think the hope of Nick Chubb, he wouldn't be available if he was, or if anybody thought this, medically assessed him, thought he was, in that place in terms of athleticism. I don't think he wouldn't be available. Yeah. I think it's a case of, can he find a way to still be productive as a number 2? Now, that being said, I think, we talked about the health of CJ. I think the health of Joe Mixon, I think's a question going into the season. He got despite them banning the hip drop tackle, he got that in Chicago, missed games, came back, and he certainly was playing through a lot when he came back. So he got that addressed in the off-season with an operation and is still in a walking boot, I think. So I think there's a bit of a question of how healthy he will be early in the season, which, if he's healthy down the stretch when it matters, then, I think that's the right thing to do. And we'll take that as it comes. So hopefully, if you add it all together, that there will be, with Woody Marks being a big trade up in the draft, as a sort of pass catching option in the backfield, and an extension of the run game in the short passing game, which was is the best, heralded certainly, or certainly viewed as the best pass catching back in this draft that's just been. Is there a sort of 2B role for Nick Chubb at this stage of his career? Can he give you enough sort of the grind out yards that you'd rather not put on Mixon? If he can do that, and banks it through the tackles and maybe get you a couple of first downs every game, and he's just 12-15 carry guy a game, just a bit of a reliever role, and if he provides any upside further than that, for $5 million a year, I think that is probably, albeit with incentives, will be a nice find, and found money at this stage. But yeah, I think his glory days are gone, and every running back loses them. It's just a question of how quickly.
The Texans obviously didn't have a first-round pick in the draft this year and used 2 of their first 3 picks when they were on the clock to go for wide receivers. Lost Stephon Diggs, obviously, this off-season. Tank Dell is still a big question mark in terms of injuries, whether he'll be fit for any of 2025. So it was Jalen Noel in the 3rd round, and then Jaden Higgins, who's the more exciting prospect, in the 2nd round. And, of course, also signed Christian Kirk this offseason. So there's a lot of change in the wide receiver position as well. What's your views on these new guys? Do either of the rookies in particular impress you?
Yeah, I think I've not had a chance to watch a lot of Ohio State games last year. I did see one, and they were both standouts on a good team that should have beat Texas if it hadn't been for a dodgy call. So I think Jaden Higgins is one that I think so far the reports are, and this looks exactly what you would have wanted, albeit a sort of Tyler Boyd's kind of sort of secondary, tertiary option, at the top of the 2nd round. There's so many guys there that go in that sort of early 2nd round, and I think that's kind of often the sweet spot. I think NIL has ruined college football to the sense that you probably only have maybe 10, 12 genuine first round picks now, like every year, whereas maybe before you got umpteen, maybe 20 if you're lucky. So if you're picking sort of in the 20s and beyond, you're as well to trade down. I think that second round top of is a sweet spot. Getting Ursary as well, which was a tackle. I think he's quite a top-heavy, awkward-looking player, but yet I think there's certainly a belief that he can develop into. There is upside there to develop into a functional tackle that I think predominantly will be running a bit more power and gap concepts this year than we had been previously. So I think he kind of fits that better than the line that we did have last year. But yeah, and Jalen Noel, I think, is an interesting one because him and Kirk are kind of similar types, as I suppose is Higgins to Nico. But yeah, look, I mean, there's ultimately when you have heavy rotations, you probably need four guys that can all go and make contributions every game. And I think you saw that with the Eagles last year. That when guys get covered up and doubled and you roll a safety over, where's the gap and where's the guy that's got a one-on-one matchup on their third or fourth corner, and you need your third or fourth wide receiver to go and win, and that's just how this league's evolved into that, and it's a league of matchups. So, from that point of view, if we can protect CJ in a way that gives you 3 to 5 seconds to get the ball out and break on a route that's going to get you move the chains more regularly than we did last year, then I think these guys give you options. As I said at the start, I think it's dangerous to rely on rookie players to sort of change the complexion. But I suppose with the Stefan Diggs thing not working out now, been injured his whole career, and then he gets injured what's week 8, was that 7 or 8? Misses the rest of the season. Yeah, Tank, I think he was just starting to bubble in after breaking his leg and getting shot last year in a nightclub. I don't think he'll play, and I think if you get anything from him in the 2026 season, I think that will be probably more active. But you look, he's quite a resolute young guy, and I think him and CG have got an incredibly close relationship. You saw that when he got injured and Jared Wayne fell on his knee when I don't think he was meant to be there. So it was incredibly unlucky. But small frame guys like that with heavier, stouter athletes falling on top of them, they're often going to get injured. That's happened 2 years in a row. So it's a shame. Them to get 3 separate knee operations again. I mean, if he comes back and makes any form of contribution, I can't imagine the same zip will be in those legs as there was prior. But when you're so slight in frame, you've not actually a lot to lose at that point. So you never know because he's not a normal NFL player in that sense. So maybe the norms or the often applied rules are non applicable in this sense. But yeah, I think Luke Nolan, Higgins, I think could they both be number 2, number 3 behind Nico, who's transformed from a sort of third round pick into something quite special. So they don't have to be taking too much pressure, but if you can split that between them and Kirk, and then you've still got John Mechie behind them, who I think many are holding out. I think maybe his cancer and all that kind of stuff's kind of taken an ACL prior to joining. I think drafted an ACL wide receiver, maybe a learning for the staff here. But you've got options in Xavier Hutchinson, who I've liked. He's never quite performed consistently enough. So those two guys may hold on to the roster, and then there's a couple undrafted rookies that I think people have said might have a chance and more upside to go. So I think is that room healthier than it was last year in terms of prospects rather than non-injuries? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think the wide receiver room will have to improve, and one of these guys is going to have to emerge as a bona fide rookie, offensive rookie of the certainly team of the year kind of type candidate for this offense to be as potent as we need it to be.
And last year, well, at the moment on the poll that we've got over on our X account, the Texans are by far and away the most voted on team to win the AFC South this season, almost 50% of the vote. Graham, who I touched on at the start, who's our Texans writer, is very surprised that the Jags are the second most voted team and that the Colts are the least voted team. How do you see the division panning out in 2025? And you said that earlier that you'd like, if you want that home field advantage in a playoff, you're going to need 13, 14 wins. Do you think that will happen, or do you think it's just another maybe 10, 11 win season where you do still hold on to the division though?
I think it's hard to say. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's rare in the sense when we had Will and CJ come in and hit the ground running year one. I would even say actually Will Anderson's rookie year was okay, won defensive rookie of the year, but I wouldn't necessarily think he overperformed. I think last year he started to, if he didn't get his ankle rolled up by his own teammate on the Halloween, I think he was right on the trajectory for defensive player of the year, as was Derek Stingley, who I thought was phenomenal last year, and the fact that he gave it to another corner who I would say arguably outperformed for large chunks of the season, particularly down the stretch. Seemed a bit of an injustice, and I think it was probably too many injuries at sort of the kind of flashier positions for people not to kind of take up and notice. But I think these things always take a year in advance, sort of have a year's lag to them. So, I can expect both those guys to be leading the division. To get back to the question, for us. But yeah, I think we're going to have to sweep the division, or 5 wins out of the 6 to be where we need to be. I think to win all 6, I think that puts you right in contention. But very few teams do it, if ever. So I don't think it's very often. So yeah, there is a lot of headroom in this division to sort of pad out your record. That is a bit of a luxury that not necessarily other teams have. So we don't take that or use that to our advantage. The record will not be where we need it to be.
Very best of luck to the Texans in 2025. I think that hopefully it's a division on the rise. It's got a bit of criticism over recent years for not being the best one. It should be slightly more competitive, at least in 2025. Remember, you can go follow Turn Up For What podcast. That's at Podcast Texans over on social media. I've been the host, Philip Marsh. As always, we've got 2 more divisions to go. We've got the NFC North and AFC West to round up our divisions, right divisions. Follow us on all the social medias at Join the Huddle UK. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time for one of those 2 divisions. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and catch you next time.